Welcome to the debate. Imagine a bank robbery in progress. The alarms are blaring and the hostages are just absolutely terrified. And suddenly, a security guard locks the vault door, holds up a detonator, and says to the armed robbers, "Take one step and I'll blow up this entire bank, all the hostages and myself."
Right, which is a genuinely terrifying calculation. I mean, you are promising total horrific annihilation just to prevent a theft. To the hostages trapped in that room, the security guard is suddenly, well, just as monstrous as the bank robber.
Exactly. But now imagine a second security guard in a different robbery. He steps forward with his own detonator and says, "Take one step and I'll blow up this bank, the hostages, myself, and I will also remotely detonate a massive bomb inside your own home where your families are sleeping."
Oh, wow, yeah. And again, both of those guards are going to be viewed as absolute monsters to the innocent people trapped in the room. They are both banking on a cold, calculated threat of mass murder to achieve a standoff.
Right, but only one of those guards actually stops the robber. Today, we are diving into the bleak, terrifying, and just endlessly fascinating strategic universe of the Trisolaran crisis.
Yes, from the three-body problem.
Exactly. Specifically, we are looking at the concept of mutually assured destruction as a defense strategy against an impending alien invasion.
And we really have to set the stage for how desperate this scenario is, right? Humanity is operating at a severe, almost incomprehensible disadvantage. We are facing the Trisolarans, an advanced alien species from a chaotic three-star system nearby, who are en route to conquer Earth. And to ensure we cannot develop the technology to fight back in that time, they have blanketed Earth with sophons.
The Trisolarans literally unfolded protons into two dimensions, etched supercomputer circuits onto them, and folded them back up. They sent these invisible microscopic supercomputers to Earth. They fly through our particle accelerators and shatter the results, completely halting our fundamental physics research. And worse, they act as an omnipresent surveillance state. They monitor every single conversation, every email, every spoken word, everywhere on the planet, all at once.
And because the sophons can see and hear absolutely everything, traditional military strategy and planning just become completely impossible. The moment a general sketches out a defense plan, the aliens know about it. But the Trisolarans have one crucial biological weakness. They communicate via direct thought. They literally cannot comprehend the concept of a lie. Human deception is completely alien to them. So humanity initiates the Wallfacer project. 4 individuals are granted absolute, unquestioned global power and nearly infinite resources.
And their only job is to design a defense plan entirely inside their own minds. They can't write it down. They can't explain their true motives to anyone. They must deceive the entire world, including their own allies in governments, to keep the sophons guessing until the trap is finally sprung.
Which brings us to the 2 Wallfacers we are examining today, Manuel Rey Diaz and Luo Ji. Rey Diaz was the former president of Venezuela, a recognized genius at asymmetric warfare. His secret Wallfacer plan was, well, it was brutal and apocalyptic. He wanted to build massive stellar hydrogen bombs, stockpile them on Mercury, and detonate them in a specific sequence. This would effectively act as a thruster, slowing Mercury's orbit and causing it to crash directly into the sun.
And the resulting chain reaction from that impact would expand the sun's atmosphere, creating a massive drag that would eventually pull in Venus, Earth, Mars, and Jupiter. I mean, Rey Diaz planned to completely obliterate the entire solar system so the Trisolarans couldn't have it.
Right, and now we have Luo Ji. He was an easygoing, somewhat lazy astronomer and sociologist. He was chosen as a Wallfacer seemingly by accident, much to the confusion of the entire world, honestly.
And himself, to be fair.
Very true. But his secret Wallfacer plan was to establish dark forest deterrents. He realized the universe is essentially a dark forest full of hostile, hyper-advanced civilizations, all hiding in the shadows. By threatening to broadcast the exact cosmic coordinates of the Trisolarian homeworld to the universe, he ensured that both Trisolaris and Earth would be wiped out by even more advanced hostile third-party aliens who would strike at those coordinates to eliminate potential threats.
Which sets up our core question today. Both men planned to hold the entire solar system hostage under the threat of complete extinction. Yet, when Rey Diaz's plan was exposed, he was instantly branded a traitor to humanity. He fled back to Venezuela, where he was brutally stoned to death by his own people in a public square. But when Luo Ji used functionally the identical threat, destroying Earth to stop the invasion, he was hailed as humanity's absolute savior and granted the godlike title of sword holder. I look at this and see a totally justified outcome, honestly.
Really?
Yes. The two plans are fundamentally different in their strategic reality, their physics, and their execution. Rey Diaz was a madman with a broken, impossible plan. Luo Ji was a brilliant strategist who achieved true salvation.
Okay, but look at what actually happened on a moral level. These plans are morally and functionally identical. Both men made the exact same dark, unforgivable calculation to hold every man, woman, and child on Earth hostage. The only reason Luo Ji was treated as a hero while Diaz was murdered in the street is due to deep psychological bias, humanity's shifting hypocritical morals, and the sheer luck of the cultural context when their plans were finally revealed.
Well, okay, let's break down the strategic reality first, because intent and capability really matter here. Rey Diaz's plan completely lacked the mutual in mutually assured destruction. He was proposing self-assured destruction. Destroying the solar system denies the Trisolarans a new, stable home. It burns the prize, but it does absolutely nothing to threaten their actual home world or their survival as a species. The Trisolarans could simply watch Earth burn from their ships, sigh in frustration, and send their generation fleet to search for another star system.
I hear that, but you are assuming the Trisolarans had other viable options. They really didn't. You have to remember the mechanics of their homeworld. It is constantly being torn apart by the unpredictable gravitational pull of 3 suns. It's not just a tough place to live, it is doomed to eventually be swallowed by one of those stars. The solar system is their only hope, their one life raft before their planet is completely engulfed. If Rey Diaz destroys the solar system, the Trisolarian civilization essentially follows humanity into the abyss. They would just freeze to death in the vacuum of space, drifting forever. The threat of losing Earth was incredibly real and existential to them.
Okay, but it wasn't a credible threat because of the physics. The plan didn't work on a basic mathematical level. Rey Diaz's own wallbreaker, the human traitor assigned by the aliens to deduce his plan, pointed out the fatal flaw during his reveal.
The funding issue.
Not just funding, physical reality. The wallbreaker looked Rey Diaz right in the eye and said, "The Lord does not care." Why? Because humanity didn't even have a fraction of the resources required to build enough bombs. Even if Earth exhausted all of its industrial resources and stripped the crust bare, we couldn't produce 1/10 of the million stellar hydrogen bombs needed to actually decelerate Mercury into the sun. Luo Ji, on the other hand, leveraged the inescapable laws of cosmic sociology. He didn't need to build a million impossible bombs. He just needed an antenna to cast a spell and broadcast a location. He threatened the Trisolarians with a mechanism that was entirely, terrifyingly viable.
All right, the physics are totally different, I will grant you that. Luo Ji's mechanism was elegant, while Diaz's was brute force. But the people of Earth weren't running orbital mechanics equations when they stoned Rey Diaz to death. When his wallbreaker exposed him, the United Nations Planetary Defense Council didn't say, "Oh, Mr. President, you're a few orders of magnitude short on your hydrogen bombs, we're cutting your funding." They reacted with absolute visceral horror. They wanted to charge him under the extinction of life on Earth law. The moral abhorrence of the public wasn't about the feasibility of moving Mercury. It was about the willingness to kill humanity. Both Wallfacers were perfectly willing to kill everyone on Earth.
Look at it this way, though. Let's go back to an analogy straight from the logic of their situation. Rey Diaz is essentially burning his own house down so a burglar can't rob it.
Okay.
The burglar loses the prize, yes, but they still have their own home to go back to. It's a tragedy for you, but the burglar survives. Luo Ji's plan wires both your house and the burglar's house to high explosives. If the burglar steps 1 foot through the door, you flip the switch and both houses burn to the ground simultaneously.
The stakes are higher.
Much higher. You simply cannot equate the deterrence value of those two scenarios. The Trisolarans didn't fear Rey Diaz because they knew his bombs couldn't actually move the planet. And even if they could, they'd still have individuals alive on the Trisolaris homeworld. With Luo Ji, they feared the absolute certainty of the Dark Forest.
You're focusing entirely on the target of the destruction, though. Step into the shoes of the people living inside the house. To them, the outcome is exactly the same. The house burns down with them locked inside it.
Sure, dead is dead.
Exactly. Both Wallfacers banked on the exact same cold threat. If you invade, we all die. Now, neither Wallfacer actually wanted to trigger their deterrent. Both were banking on the threat alone being sufficiently terrifying to force a stalemate. But look at the agency involved.
Agency?
Yeah. Diaz makes humans the direct agents of destruction through massive nuclear bombs. Luo Ji delegates the destruction to a third party by broadcasting coordinates into space. Delegating the murder to a hyper-advanced alien sniper doesn't wash the blood off Luo Ji's hands. He was perfectly, coldly willing to end human history.
But competence and secrecy matter when we are talking about military strategy on this scale. The entire point of the Wallfacer project is to keep the plan hidden from the sophons. It's a battle of the mind. Rey Diaz fundamentally failed at his one job. He was a crude soldier who built massive, highly visible bombs and faked a psychological phobia of the sun to hide his true intentions. And he was easily deduced by his wall breaker. Luo Ji, however, successfully hid his true intention behind a facade of complete, indulgent laziness.
He did demand a very nice lake house.
He went to a secluded mountain lake, demanded a perfect romantic partner be found for him, drank fine wine, and seemingly did nothing for years. The Sophons and humanity thought he was just a self-absorbed hedonist squandering public funds.
Which was a great cover.
It was perfect. He masked his initial test run as a meaningless spell cast on a distant random star, 187J3X1. He kept his plan totally secret until the very moment he was holding the detonator.
Hold on, does stealth make an action moral? Is an abhorrent act suddenly heroic just because the person was sneaky enough to get away with it? You are falling headfirst into outcome bias here. We judge Rey Diaz as a villain purely because he was caught in the planning phase.
We judge him because his plan was bad.
We judge Luo Ji as a hero because he succeeded in secret, and humanity only found out about his dark forest deterrent after it had already saved us. Think about it. If Luo Ji had stood up at a UN hearing during the early years of the crisis and said, "My plan is to draw the attention of godlike alien destroyers to our solar system, ensuring our total annihilation if the Trisolarans don't back down," he would have been stoned to death in the streets just like Diaz.
I get that, I really do. But the secrecy was the feature, not a bug, of Luo Ji's brilliance. He understood the fundamental axioms of cosmic sociology taught to him by Ye Wenji.
The axioms of survival.
Right, let's walk through that because it's the core of his strategy. First, survival is the primary need of any civilization. Second, civilization continuously grows and expands, but the total matter in the universe remains constant.
Which creates chains of suspicion.
Exactly. Because of the vast distances in space and the speed of light, you can never know if another civilization is benevolent or malicious. And because of the possibility of a sudden technological explosion, even a primitive civilization could become a threat overnight. So the only logical, survival-based move is to preemptively destroy any civilization that reveals its location.
Shoot first, ask questions never.
Precisely. The universe is a dark forest, and every civilization is an armed hunter stalking through the trees. Luo Ji understood that humanity's own morality was its greatest weakness. He didn't just hide his plan from the Trisolarians, he had to hide it from humanity because he knew human morality would never allow a mutual suicide pact to be built.
Exactly. Human morality would never allow it. That perfectly proves my point. The difference between how these two men are remembered comes down almost entirely to the cultural timing of their reveals. This context is everything. When Rey Diaz proposed his suicidal strategy, humanity was still in the early, optimistic years of the crisis era. They still genuinely thought they could win a conventional war. They were building a massive, majestic space fleet. To a society that arrogantly believes it can win, a suicide pact looks like absolute madness. It looks like treason.
Right, they hadn't been humbled yet.
And compare that to the world Luo Ji woke up to?
Yes. Luo Ji activated his plan after the Doomsday Battle, We have to really remember what happened there. Humanity sent out a combined fleet of 2,000 incredibly advanced stellar warships to intercept a single Trisolaran probe, the droplet. It was the size of a truck.
A truck, yeah. And that one droplet was made of strong interaction material. The atoms were locked together by the strong nuclear force, meaning there was zero space between them. It was perfectly smooth, indestructible, and completely ignored our understanding of physics.
Our lasers and missiles just bounced off it.
They did nothing. It literally just accelerated and physically rammed through our ship's fusion reactors like a bullet through glass. It decimated the entire human fleet of 2,000 ships in a matter of hours. Humanity went from complete blinding hubris to absolute crushing despair in an afternoon.
They realized they were bugs.
They were entirely out of options. My argument is that humanity only accepts monsters when they are completely desperate. Luo Ji wasn't hailed as a savior because his plan was more moral. He was hailed as a savior because humanity was on its knees, waiting for the executioner's axe to fall.
That is a very fair point. The psychological impact of the Doomsday Battle can't be overstated. The context of that despair is vital. But I think that actually supports my position that Luo Ji was a vastly superior strategist. He waited for the exact right moment.
He was in hibernation for most of it.
True, but he understood human psychology as well as cosmic sociology when he finally acted. And further, if you want proof that humanity's moral judgment is completely fickle and disconnected from the reality of deterrence, look at what happened to Luo Ji later. Even he wasn't universally loved forever. Once the deterrence era began, Luo Ji became the sword holder. He literally sat staring at a white wall holding the button that would broadcast the coordinates for over half a century, keeping the Trisolarans at bay through sheer force of will.
A terrifying existence.
Completely. But during that time, peace flourished. Earth and Trisolaris shared technology, art, and culture. And what did humanity do once they grew soft and comfortable again under the umbrella of his protection? They turned on him. They started viewing him as an evil tyrant holding the fate of two entire species hostage. As soon as he finally handed over the detonator to his successor, the public immediately wanted to prosecute him for moondicide, for destroying that random test star system years ago. It proves that whenever the crisis seems far off, the people willing to do what's objectively necessary to ensure survival are viewed as monsters.
Which perfectly validates what I'm saying. The plans are functionally identical in their moral horror. The only difference is the lens of desperation through which humanity views them at any given moment. Rey Diaz was a Wallfacer doing exactly what was asked of him by the United Nations. He was tasked with creating a deterrent against an invincible enemy. He recognized early on that modern high-tech weapons are completely useless against an overwhelmingly superior force. He recognized that humanity's only leverage was the real estate the aliens wanted. The absolute tragedy of Rey Diaz is that he was a man slightly ahead of his time, operating with insufficient technology.
I wouldn't call him ahead of his time.
I would. His reward for trying to save humanity, for taking on the psychological burden of planning the death of the solar system, was to be pelted with rocks by his own people. A grandmother literally crushed his skull with a stone in the town square, screaming that he would have killed her grandson.
It was a brutal end, yes, but I'm just not convinced by that line of reasoning, because it ignores the fundamental strategic failure of Diaz's approach. You say he was slightly ahead of his time, but he was operating in the wrong paradigm entirely. He was thinking like a 20th century general. He was thinking about bombs, about holding physical territory, about scorched-earth tactics. It's a very localized human way of fighting a war. Luo Ji stepped outside of human paradigms entirely. He didn't build a weapon in the traditional sense. He weaponized the universe itself.
But wait, let's talk about the weaponization of the universe, specifically the Snow Project, because this is how Luo Ji actually implemented his threat. After Luo Ji woke up from his long hibernation, the public had largely dismissed him as a relic, but he quietly took control of the Snow Project.
Right, tracking the droplets.
Supposedly, this was an effort to track Trisolarian droplets by using stellar hydrogen bombs to create massive dust clouds from Neptune's oil film. But in reality, under the nose of the Sophons, he was meticulously placing 3,614 bombs in orbit around the sun.
A brilliant misdirection.
He linked them to a dead man's switch on a biological monitor on his wrist. If he died, the bombs would detonate, creating dust clouds that would cause the sun to flicker in a specific galactic-scale Morse code pattern, broadcasting the coordinates of Trisolaris to the dark forest. It is an incredibly brilliant bit of misdirection. But functionally, mechanically, how is placing thousands of stellar hydrogen bombs around the sun to threaten total destruction any different than Rey Diaz placing thousands of stellar hydrogen bombs on Mercury to threaten total destruction? It's the exact same hardware.
The hardware might be similar, sure, but the mechanism of the threat is entirely different. Diaz's bombs were the weapon itself. Their physical blast and the resulting kinetic impact were supposed to do the work, which was scientifically impossible. Luo Ji's bombs were just the ink on a cosmic telegraph.
That's a good way to put it.
Right? The weapon wasn't the bombs. The weapon was the dark forest. The weapon was the unseen, hyper-advanced civilizations listening in the dark, waiting to strike. That is a threat that Trisolarians couldn't calculate a defense against. That is why the moment Luo Ji revealed his hand at the graveyard, facing down the Sophons, the Trisolarians immediately stopped their invasion fleet. They knew they were beaten.
I'll grant that the mechanism of Luo Ji's threat was infinitely more elegant and actually feasible. The Trisolarians couldn't stop a lightspeed broadcast, but I cannot let go of the hypocrisy in how the men behind the plans were treated, and the toll it took on them. Look at the psychological weight.
They both suffered, definitely.
Rey Diaz developed a debilitating, agonizing phobia of the sun. He couldn't even look at daylight without trembling and suffering panic attacks because he knew what his plan entailed. He was carrying the massive weight of murdering the solar system.
True.
And Luo Ji suffered too. When he was finally forced into the role of sword holder, the novel describes him as withdrawn, almost losing language, becoming the silent, stone-like deterrence machine. Both men sacrificed every shred of their humanity to become the ultimate weapon for Earth.
I agree with that, but Luo Ji sacrificed his humanity for a plan that actually worked. He held the knife to the throat of both worlds. Yes, but because the knife was sharp, and because the Trisolarians knew with absolute certainty he would use it, it forced a stalemate. He achieved over 60 years of total peace. Rey Diaz built a blunt, broken knife, waved it around where everyone could see it, and got himself killed for it.
That is an incredibly Machiavellian view of history. You are essentially saying the ends justify the means. Because Luo Ji won, his moral transgressions are completely forgiven and he gets a statue, while Diaz is a villain simply because he failed the physics check.
Not just a physics check, the strategic check.
But if we are evaluating the fundamental concept of mutually assured destruction, we have to acknowledge that the foundational logic of both men was identical. They both realized that in a universe governed by total destruction, survival depends on leveraging the fear of total annihilation to prevent conflict.
Well, we are nearing the end of our time, so let's synthesize where we stand. I maintain that while human perception is indeed fickle, as we saw with the public turning on Luo Ji later, his status as humanity's reluctant savior is ultimately earned. His plan was scientifically feasible. He successfully navigated the psychological warfare required to keep it secret from an omnipresent alien surveillance network. And most importantly, he achieved true mutually assured destruction by holding the enemy's actual homeworld at risk. Rey Diaz failed on all those fronts, creating a plan that was physically impossible, easily discovered, and lacked the necessary leverage to actually stop the Trisolarian fleet.
And I look at the exact same events and maintain that the functional mechanics of how the bombs work do not erase the moral equivalence of the two Wallfacers. Both men made the ultimate, unforgivable dark calculation to hold Earth hostage. The radically different treatment of the two men, one violently stoned to death in his homeland, the other elevated to a godlike status, highlights humanity's tendency to judge the exact same moral action as either horrific treason or divine salvation, depending purely on their own level of desperation at the time. When we are comfortable, we demand clean hands and moral purity. When we are facing extinction and our fleets are burning, we beg for a monster to save us.
It is a genuinely chilling reality to consider. The dark forest universe of Luo Ji forces us to ask what we are willing to discard in the name of pure survival. Traditional morality, it seems, is the very first casualty of an interstellar war.
It really is. It forces us to ask where the line is between a madman and the savior. And in this story, that line is drawn only by timing and success.
Which brings us right back to our bank robbers. The guard who threatens to blow up the vault, the innocent hostages, and the robber's own home is a terrifying figure. We might hate him, we might fear him, but when the dust settles and the robber is gone, he is the one holding the keys to the bank. We leave the ultimate judgment of Manuel, Rey Diaz, and Luo Ji up to you, our listeners. Thank you for joining us on The Debate.